taking a closer look. I can pull this guy out of the way. Tell me it was that easy. 2005 GMC Envoy. It's got this rough idle that seems to come and go, and it seems to be here a lot lately. And it's also making this crazy, weird sound I think I've pinpointed. So today, hopefully, I'm gonna fix some problems on this thing. Now this Envoy only has about 65,500 miles on it, and those are original miles on the original engine. And because of those extremely low original miles on this engine, I can't rule out a very serious engine problem, but I'm thinking it's gotta be something more common, less serious. So about that pinpointed noise, this is kind of related, but I don't think this has anything to do with the rough idle. Let me start the car and show you what I'm talking about. Now, I don't know if you could tell right when I started it, but the engine started really rough. It's almost like it's misfiring as it's starting. But back to that sound again. You can hear that really good right now. Now you heard that sound, and it does sound very peculiar. For a while, I was convinced it was internal, like the camshaft or something like that. It took me a while to figure out that the alternator was an issue, and that's because not just a couple of years ago, I changed this alternator. It's a brand new alternator. So I never suspected that after just a couple of years, the alternator would be producing sounds like this. Now the thing is that alternator is bolted essentially to the side of the engine block. And so if that thing is making those kinds of sounds, it's going to radiate through that engine block and kind of sound like it's coming from the valve cover or something like that. That's my theory anyway. Now about that sound and the rough idle, I don't know. Is it possible that that's causing a rough idle? Maybe. I don't think that's what it is, but I'm going to tackle that common problem of the intake manifold gaskets on this thing. I've been kind of dreading it, but I bought the parts. So today's the day. Yes, this thing right here, this is the intake manifold, and that's gonna have to come out. The funny thing is, you gotta remove this alternator in order to get at some of the bolts for the intake manifold. So in a weird way, I'm getting a free, not so free alternator swap by doing the intake manifold gaskets. Since that thing's gotta come out anyway, there's no extra work. Here's the parts I bought. I usually always try to go genuine GM or AC Delco. And here's the new alternator that I just picked up. Yes, this is the exact alternator that I already put in this thing a few years ago, and there's the numbers on that. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the negative side of the battery. And the next thing I'm going to do is remove this air box. And I also do need to remove this serpentine belt, so I'll do that now. And I just removed it from the alternator and laid it off to the side. Looking at the top of the valve cover here, you can see all 6 of those coil packs, which are brand new, and I made a whole video on replacing these. And that's because at the time I was assuming that these coil packs might be a source of rough idle. And I also made a video regarding the throttle body in which I took the whole thing apart, changed the gasket, and cleaned it out. And I'll link those videos in the cards above as well. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and take out this first bolt right here on the end. And there's the loosened bolt there, and it looks like they're captured bolts, so you can't actually pull them out. All right, pretty easy to take out. Okay, have the throttle body removed. Should have a little bit more room. That might be it. Okay. There we go. Let's see if that gave me anything. Yep, it sure did. There we go. Yes. Whew. Well, here we are, the intake manifold, and you can see those gaskets there. And I got to look closer at them, but my initial impression was that they all looked to be okay. This is pretty interesting, being able to see directly inside these intake ports and looking at the valves. All right, taking a much closer look at these gaskets outside here, I'm not seeing any areas of the gaskets that look like there was anything really passing by. All of these surfaces seem to be nice and clean. Nothing seems to be broken or cracked or anything like that. In fact, the only surface that I'm seeing that has any sort of anomaly is right here on this one off to the edge, but that may have just been from me trying to get this thing out of the vehicle. I'm not too sure. If I try to wipe that, it does seem like it's kind of on there pretty good, so maybe that was some sort of failure point right there. And here's the top of that valve cover. Now that I have that intake manifold removed, I feel like I can't leave the valve cover gaskets alone. So I did go ahead and buy a kit that covers the valve cover gasket as well as all those gaskets for the spark plug wells. So first order of business is to remove all of these coil packs. All this wiring is also going to have to be moved out of the way. That's it. Oh, the boot stuck to the spark plug. That's okay. Okay, you can probably see that I have this wiring harness completely disconnected, I guess, except for right there. Now, we now have an entire wiring harness out of the way. And we all know how fun that's going to be to put back in place. The reason why I wanted to do that is, of course, because I need the clearest path possible to get this valve cover out of here. I also need to secure this so it doesn't keep flipping back over right where I don't want it to be. And here are the gaskets for those spark plug wells, and this is what seals that oil from going down into the spark plug well, which is a problem that I am having. So I do know that I need to do this just based off of that. It comes with all new grommets for the bolts, and then here should be a big one-piece. Yeah, there we go. Big one-piece gasket here for that valve cover. And these bolts here are all 10 millimeter, and they're pretty simple to take out. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and try to pop this valve cover. Wow, that was easy. Okay, taking a closer look at everything underneath that valve cover, and it looks really, really clean. Starting here in the front, you can see this thing does have a variable valve timing situation going on. You can see the timing chain. And if we look all the way down in there, you can see the guides, and everything seems to look pretty darn good. I don't see any anomalies, nothing broken. Then coming back up here and looking at the lobes on the cams, there is some wear you can see, but nothing looks absolutely detrimental. Comment below if you suspect otherwise. So if you look close, you can see that the spark plug boot basically stuck to the spark plugs when I was taking those coil packs out. That's okay. I should be able to just slide that coil pack right back on here with a little bit of grease and everything will go back together just fine. But I wanted to show you this right here, this gasket. This is the gasket that protects the oil from seeping down into that spark plug well. And the first time I ever put new spark plugs in this engine, I noticed that inside these spark plug wells was full of oil. So I've kept an eye on it periodically, and it hasn't been too bad, although there still is oil down in there. So I am really happy that I'm going to be swapping these things out, because you can see that is a definite area that needs to have a good seal. And looking at this camshaft lobe right here, you can see there's like a little kind of wear line. Now at first I was like, wow, that's a little bit worn, but when I use my fingernail, you cannot feel that whatsoever. Interestingly, it is also on that roller down there, but again, you can't feel anything, so I'm not too worried about that. And also, if you're wondering about these sensors here, like this camshaft position sensor, this is all new, original equipment. I even changed out this guy right here, just all the common sensors and failures on these engines, trying to get everything to run as good as possible. Everything that needed to be changed has been changed. And now I'll clean up the gasket mating surfaces and go ahead and reinstall everything. Let's take a look at the inside of the valve cover. This is the underside, of course. And I already went through and cleaned out all the valleys around the entire thing where that gasket is going to lay. But I thought it might be interesting to remove these center gaskets here and just show you kind of how they sit in there and what they look like. So I'm going to go ahead and clean out all the oil in the valleys there where the gasket sits. And I think you need to do that just to give these gaskets a fighting chance at succeeding in sealing everything off. Take a look at the old gasket here versus the new one. You can see this mating surface right here on this old one is pretty darn flat. Whereas when you look at the new one, it's nice and round. So you can see just over time, even though this engine only has 65,000 original miles, the time is what's taken a toll on these and has really flattened these things out. So on these new gaskets, this end here with this little ridge on it goes inside the valve cover. You really want to make sure you get it oriented right so that they're not twisted in any way. Probably using two hands would be best. With that seated, I'm going to go ahead and press around it with my thumb just to make sure that everything is fully seated in place. So that one's done. Just have 5 more to go. All right, I have the main outside gasket there done, as well as all those spark plug wells. But this kit did come with these grommets here for all of the bolts. I already replaced this one. You can see these are the factory ones, and I'll change one out for you just to see how easy it is. Okay, so I simply just take a screwdriver. You could probably just pull it. There we go. So there's that factory grommet there, and all that you do now is just pop it right off. No big deal. And then the new grommet simply just pushes right on. Really, just push it right in. Just like that. Maybe give it a spin or two just to make sure that it's fully seated. That's pretty much it. Easy. If I can slide this in this way. Okay. I think I can pull this guy out of the way. Wow. Tell me it was that easy. That was awesome. So by loosening both bolts on this AC line, I could lift it up and move it out of the way, slide it in that way and that way. Everything is definitely lined up and in place. All the gaskets look like they landed where they need to land. They stayed in place. The bolts are lined up, and that's what that looks like with that valve cover back in place. All the grommets you can see are blue because those are all our new grommets. I looked down in the spark plug wells. None of those gaskets got dislodged during that install. So all I have to do now is figure out the torque spec and sequence for tightening these bolts back down. Okay, valve cover on. All the bolts have just been snugged by hand. I have my torque wrench here, and the only thing I could find online, there was a couple random numbers. One of them was 109 on one site, 109 inch-pounds. The other multiple sites said 89 inch-pounds. So being that I'm using a low dollar torque wrench, I'm gonna go ahead and go with the 89 inch-pounds first. I'm gonna see how good that feels. Probably start with a lower number, something like 30 inch-pounds. This is so very slight. This is at 30 inch-pounds. This is the last bolt. So I have my torque wrench now set to 60 inch-pounds. Okay, that was only about a quarter turn there. So 1, 2, 3. So this is 2. Let's see how much we get on this one. That wasn't even a quarter turn. Yeah, we're looking at maybe just under a quarter turn to go from 30 to 60. All right, we have the last 2 bolts here. I'm going to show you how slight we're moving from 60 to 89 inch-pounds. Right there. And this is the last one, number 21. Right there. All right, so I've now torqued this valve cover, all 21 bolts, to 89 inch-pounds. Every single last one of them, even the one that's right back down there in the middle. Looking here at the intake manifold, you can see that these gaskets are relatively the same. Just simple push in, one piece, well, in this case there's 3 of them, but a one-piece type of gasket that takes care of 2 of these intake ports. Okay, the new gasket is here on the right. I'm gonna hold it down flat. I just wanna zoom in here because you can see a difference between the two. You can tell that the new gasket is definitely thicker than the old gasket, which makes sense. So I really don't know if these were functioning perfectly fine or if there was a vacuum leak through these. Like I said, anytime you look online reading about these, intake manifolds on the 4.2 liter, these gaskets are a common failure point. So with all of this work, I'm really hoping that these new gaskets do some better sealing. Maybe I did have a leak here, and maybe these gaskets are gonna fix that. But one thing's for sure, I gotta pull these old gaskets out and then clean up all the oil in the valleys there before I install the new ones. So these just simply push into place. The valve cover is finished. Next up is this intake manifold. You can see I have it ready to go here, and it's gonna go right down there. I'm gonna go ahead and try to slide this thing in, trying to get around everything. How in the world? I guess it's just little by little. I'm doing okay. It's a bit frustrating. It's been designed better. Okay, here we go. Little by little. I think we're in position. So I've just got my little 10mm socket with the extension on it, and just getting them started by hand, just making sure not to cross thread anything since all of this is going into aluminum. Okay, the very last bolt is the only one I could not slip the torque wrench on, so I've really just been doing this one by feel. So I was able to go over 9 of the 10 bolts with my torque wrench here. I did one pass at 30 inch-pounds, another pass at 60, and then the final pass at 80. But that 10th bolt, the one way back here in the corner, there's no way my torque wrench would have fit back there. So I just went ahead and tightened it by hand. And then at the very end of the torque sequence, I went over every bolt with this, and that way I was able to feel exactly what they all felt like, making sure that that 10th bolt felt the same. The time has now come for me to weave this new alternator into place. It's gonna go right in there, and yes, that is the very next step. I got every single thing taken care of up top, except for, of course, that air box. But all the electrical connections are done. Everything is bolted back into place. The computer's back into place. Every single nut and bolt accounted for. Okay, we do still have the fuel line disconnected, and this wiring harness is not connected either. This is still loose, so should have enough room to just kind of squirrel this thing in there. Oh yeah, there we go. Real quickly, I want to point out a recent tool purchase that I made, and it's been awesome. In the last, I don't know, 3-4 of my videos, I've absolutely needed this ratcheting flex head wrench set. This is a 7-piece metric set. This is what they look like. The end is totally flexible and, of course, ratcheting. And the reason why I point that out is because, as you can see right here, I have my 15mm flex head on the bottom bolt, and that is about the only tool that's going to be able to get in and on that bottom bolt with such limited space down here. All right, all the work is now done. All my T's crossed and I's dotted. I made sure everything is back together. I just hooked the battery back up. Let's go ahead and start this thing and make sure that it runs good, at least as good as it ran before, hopefully better. And obviously we'll be listening to that alternator to make sure there's no more sounds coming from that. All right, I got the key in the ignition. We're gonna prime this fuel pump a few times because I had that fuel line disconnected. So before I try to start this thing, I'm just gonna cycle that fuel pump a couple of times here, maybe one more time. It's probably a good idea just to recheck for any fuel leaks around this fitting that I disconnected. Nothing, totally dry. Well, here it is. Let's go ahead and give it a start. Okay, that was interesting. I don't hear any weird sounds. Definitely no weird sounds coming from the engine, which confirms to me that that sound was directly coming from that alternator. All right, right now I'm happy but cautious. I do know the sound from the alternator is gone, but the real test is going to be to drive this thing and see if it has that rough idle that I've been battling. The thing that I really wanted to fix today was the running rough idle issue. And even at times the car will actually die if you just press the gas a little too fast and then take your foot off the gas. It'll sometimes die, like in a parking lot situation. Right now, as I'm driving this thing around, it seems to be driving pretty good, but it's just about as good as it was before. So I'm not sensing anything wrong right now. It seems to be running really smooth. Okay, I'm at a stop sign right now. And yeah, it's not idling smoothly. You can tell it's got like a lope to it. So I don't know where to go next from here. It's boggling my mind. What really is hard to deal with is going through all that work, all that time to find that the problem persists. The benefit though is having a YouTube channel and filming the entire process. I get to show you guys how I was able to get all these things done and taken care of. So I do hope you got something out of this. Maybe just some good old-fashioned entertainment. If you did, please guys, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. It really helps this video and the channel, and I need it. And also, if you've watched this far and you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing. I'm Jimmy for One Road, and I will see you in the next one.